Hello, and welcome back to Cape Corner, where we explore the history, story, and cultural impact of a different character every episode. I'm Blue, dabba dee dabba die. I'm sorry. The joke had to be made eventually, so consider me just getting it out of the way early. Last week I've covered Superman, and I was originally going to do a follow-up with today's episode being about Batman, the other half of the world's finest duo. But instead, I'm following up on a request made in the Cape Corner Discord. If you'd like to request episodes of certain characters, give your input on the series, or even just hang out with a bunch of cool, like-minded fans, the link to the Discord is in the description. That being said, today I'll be touching on a lesser-known character whose storied history is almost as old as the world's finest themselves. Today, I'll be discussing the sometimes magical, sometimes alien, and always incredible Blue Beetle. Today will be a bit different. While multiple people have been Superman, I focus solely on Kal-El, or Clark Kent, because there was just so much to talk about with him. He's a character that has been ran consistently since 1938, so it's not like there was any worry on my end for a lack of material to cover. But with Blue Beetle, he is a much less utilized character. He's very on and off again throughout the decades. So in order to make this go more smoothly, I'll be discussing the entire Blue Beetle legacy, which includes 3.5 characters. I'll explain what I mean by and a half in just a moment. The first thing to mention is that old comics franchises didn't always stay, and character rights are a big deal in the industry. By the way, I apologize if you hear me sniffle. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, but, you know, heroes press on, no matter whether it's rain or sleet or... I think that's actually Mailman, but whatever. But yes, character rights. DC especially has a history of buying up failing companies and incorporating their characters into their pantheon. Blue Beetle was originally created by Fox Comics, or the Fox Features Syndicate as it was called for some reason. Blue Beetle was a major flagship character of theirs, to the point where they actually sponsored a Blue Beetle Day event at the 1939 New York World's Fair, which, despite being called the 1939 New York World's Fair, I guess it operates under, like, car logic because it took place in August of 1940, but whatever. The point is, it was a relay race with over 300 children, which was broadcast over the radio. It's wild. However, due to a stylistic change in their storytelling, Fox took a major hit in the 50s when the Comics Code Authority, the CCA, which you will doubtlessly hear a lot about in this series, imposed limitations on what comics could or could not depict. They were largely a censorship organization for comic books because they believed that it was a children's medium. So they really cracked down on what they felt was appropriate to depict to kids. They were hardcore in the camp of graphic novels or comics for adults just don't exist camp of thinking. And they would be the arbiters for a lot of the weird storytelling of the Silver Age. It's the same reason why Joker took a long hiatus from actually killing people. It's the same reason why a lot of magic and cosmic heroes were made in the first place, because they needed workarounds for how heroes could fight enemies without killing them. Actually, it's also a big reason why Blade was not prominent in the Silver Age because I believe vampires were banned by the Comics Code Authority for a long time. But anyway, I'm getting off on a big tangent. So, the Fox Feature Syndicate took a hit to their business in the 50s, and as a result, they went out of business and sold Blue Beetle to Charlton Comics, a company which itself would struggle to make a name for itself over the decades until the 80s, when it finally died off and DC purchased the rights of most of its characters. This is how Blue Beetle, as well as others like Captain Marvel, or Shazam these days, came to become DC Comics characters. The original Blue Beetle, who appeared in 1939, was a Golden Age character named Dan Garrett, and I immediately need to address that 3.5 thing I brought up earlier. You see, Garrett, as in Dan Garrett, is spelled with one T at the end. He was the son of a police officer killed by a criminal, and he originally fought crime without any superhuman abilities. He later donned a bulletproof blue costume and took a mysterious substance called Vitamin 2X, which gifted him with superhuman strength and stamina. Over time, he'd gain additional powers like X-ray vision or flight, and much like Superman of the Golden Age, his power set was largely left up to the whim of the writers. That's a major thing I didn't touch on with last week's episode, and I kind of regret that I didn't mention it, but in the Golden Age, when they were still figuring out how consistent they had to be with the character, how much stories had to make sense, like every week, a different writer would just be, or every month, however these comics were released, a different writer would just be like, well, I think it would be neat if Superman did this. And so he just had limitless amounts of powers he could pull out of his ass. Anything from, like, how the Christopher Reeves movies had him have wall rebuilding vision, to him being able to shoot a miniaturized version of himself out of the palm of his hand, which was just as strong as the full-size version of him, who could in turn shoot an even smaller miniaturized version of himself out of his hand, and just have endless amounts of gradually tinier and tinier Supermen fight as like a clone team. I didn't make that up. That's a real thing Superman could do. So while Blue Beetle, Dan Garrett, was not that ridiculous, he was just suddenly able to fly or whatever in some issues. As the zeitgeist of superheroes faded in the late 40s, the character turned more towards the noir style of comics, like a true crimes detective kind of story. It had sadistic violence and scantily clad women. And that's when the CCA struck, and Charlton took over. However, Charlton wanted to sort of soft reboot the character. So they created Dan Garrett, with 2 T's at the end of his name. See, this is what I mean by, like, and a half. There's technically 2 different iterations of Dan Garrett, with slightly different spellings and a different focus and a different management. The new Silver Age version of Dan Garrett was an archaeologist who found a mystical scarab during a dig in Egypt. The scarab was used to imprison an evil mummified pharaoh. And Danny Boy was just like, yeah, that seems like a good idea to remove this from this tomb. Uh-oh, oops, whoopsie doodles, there's a mummy now. Golly gosh, who could have foreseen this? See, like, I feel like a lot of these stories are just someone defiles a tomb and fucks everything up. The Mummy, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, it's all because they decided to mess with ancient Egyptian artifacts that now the world economy is ran based on how well you can play a card game. calling out Kajida for a reason I'm sure makes total sense. Without the use of retcons, wink wink, Dan was granted powers like strength, superhuman vision, flight, and energy blasts, which he used to deal with that whole mummy situation he created before going on to have other heroic adventures. Ultimately, this iteration of Dan Garrett, with two T's, only ran from 1964 to 1966, before Charlton debuted his replacement, Ted Kord. Before I get to him, though, one last note about Dan. They later retconned Dan's origin so that Garrett, with two T's, was actually the reincarnation of Garrett with one T, and this reincarnation was set into motion by some unspecified gods, though fans presume them to be the same ones responsible for his mystical scarab. This would of course become bullshit later on, with further retcons, but whatever. That's comics, baby. But as you can see, they were at least trying to make an attempt to explain why there was two very different Dan Garretts who had been Blue Beetle. So, they get a nice "you tried" star for that one. The proper second Blue Beetle was Theodore Stephen Kord, or Ted Kord. He was a genius inventor and a gifted athlete. So in that, being just like a fit guy with equipment, he was actually closer to the original Garrett, with one T, than with his actual mentor. And yes, I say mentor, not predecessor, because Ted was a former student of Garrett with two T's. And they actually worked together to investigate Ted's uncle, Jarvis Kord, who was building an android army with aspirations of world domination. Uncles. Am I right, fellas? Insert the boop 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 music right here. So, android army. Messing stuff up. Garrett changed into Blue Beetle, but he was killed in the battle, passing the responsibility and mantle of Blue Beetle onto Ted as he died. But somehow, however, he was unable to also pass on the scarab. I don't know why. Like, I don't know. In my head, he had to have the scarab on him, right? So why couldn't... Whatever. So, anyway, this led to Ted becoming an entirely tech and skill-based Blue Beetle, using gadgets and weaponry, not dissimilar to Batman. I feel like that was purposeful, because Batman was starting to get very popular at this time. Kord would ultimately fade into relative obscurity as a character until the DC acquisition in the 80s. At this point, it was revealed that Kord became the owner of Kord Industries, a scientific company rivaling Star Labs, or sometimes played up as a joke to make Star Labs look better. Again, depends on the story. He also teamed up with the conman from the future superhero Booster Gold on some get-rich-quick schemes, since it seemed that his company was having troubles and was sort of on and off again, even relevant in the stories. He was even shown at a young age designing the Justice League's security systems, giving him his original inspiration to become a hero in the first place. Kord became a member of the Justice League of America as a sort of third-string hero, along with Booster Gold, and the two actually became a duo known as Blue and Gold. There was a minor arc where he battled with weight loss. He had a cameo in Birds of Prey. It was revealed that he had a heart condition, but his ultimate fate came from Maxwell Lord, a modern JLA villain. Lord had tried to get Ted to join up with him when he was making a big power play. Upon being told to "rot in hell, Max," Ted Kord gets shot through the brain. It would later come out that before that happened, Ted, who had once thought the original Scarab was destroyed, well, he found out that it had actually been rediscovered, untouched, once again in a temple in Egypt. So Cord wound up reacquiring it. This led to speculation for a bit that the character may return, to which writer Greg Rucka, I hope I'm saying that correctly, honestly, hilariously stated, "There was a breeze blowing through his brain, and he was incinerated. How much clearer can it be?" I, look, that's just funny. But at the same time, I don't blame fans, because it's not like you could disintegrate someone, and it's not like that stops comic book characters from returning. Batman got disintegrated one time, and it turned out he just happened to be on a cool time travel road trip, and he came back ready for more. So, anyway, so the Scarab was retrieved by Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, and then it was given to Shazam, the wizard, not the hero. You can see why the names can get confusing sometimes. Not too long after, Shazam, the wizard, was killed, and the Scarab was just blasted across the globe. It landed in El Paso, Texas, where a young man named Jaime Reyes lived, with his father, his mother, and his little sister. Jaime was bummed out, because his dad owned a garage, and he wanted to help his dad with the garage. But I believe Jaime's like a high schooler, and his dad pretty rightfully felt that Jaime should just enjoy being a kid for as long as he can, and study hard to get a better job, rather than jumping straight into work at a young age. And that's a sentiment that uh, I think goes a long way to show that his dad cares, but Jaime still was struggling with sort of an inferiority complex. You know, when there's work to be done and you're the only one that's not helping it get done, you know, it feels bad. You don't want to feel like you're a dead weight. So I get it. Um, However, while he was taking a walk, Jaime stumbled upon the Scarab, and he took it home with him. Later that night, Booster Gold actually showed up to retrieve it, which I assume means just breaking into this house in El Paso. But, you know, if anyone's going to do that, Booster Gold is going to do that. However, when Booster Gold confronted Jaime about it, Jaime discovered that it fused to his spine while he was asleep. So, it's not quite chestburster level, but it still goes to show why you maybe shouldn't just mess with random alien stuff that you see. With no way to remove the Scarab without killing Jaime, Booster Gold actually recruited and drafted the mortified teenager into a fight with a cyborg menace threatening the world, caused once again by Maxwell Lord. Despite having to run before he could walk, Jaime actually did pretty well as the third Blue Beetle. For him, the Scarab would actually create a sort of power armor around him, and using the sort of Iron Man nanotechnology way of power armor, it could kind of shapeshift and create different weapons on the fly. A lot of energy-based weapons, like some big, like, staple cannon. Like, imagine just a really big staple gets shot at you, and you get stuck to a wall because you just got your torso pinned by this, like, big blue staple. Like, that's one of the things he uses pretty often. He can just make, like, big hammers or swords. He's got, like, a HUD where he can, like, hear audio stuff or see in different kinds of vision. He can breathe in space. He can breathe underwater. And the Scarab even acts as, like, an AI companion. So if you know Iron Man with his nano suit, it's similar to that. Except he didn't build it. It's an alien suit. So there you go. Um, but speaking of alien creation, a big reveal would happen when Guy Gardner, who is possibly the worst Green Lantern. What are you going to do about it, Guy Gardner fans, all two of you? He was suddenly sent into a frenzy by his ring, which was reacting to the Scarab, so he attacked Jaime, who had to fend him off. It turns out that the Scarab was never mystical in origin, thus making that whole reincarnation thing with Dan Garrett make no sense. Uh, it was instead extraterrestrial. A long-ass time ago, an alien race called the Reach tried to do that whole universal domination shtick that so many alien races love to do. The Guardians of the Universe, who act as the council in charge of the Green Lantern Corps, would go to war with the Reach, ultimately defeating the would-be conquerors. In an attempt to sort of rebrand themselves as the cool, hip, new good guys, the Reach promised to make amends, sharing, and I'm using air quotes around the word sharing, their technology with the universe in the hopes of repairing the damage they caused. In actuality, they developed numerous scarabs to act as advance agents, meant to bond with a champion of each planet and slowly brainwash them into becoming part of a hive mind with the Reach. This would create a Black Beetle, which in Young Justice was actually a member of the Reach themselves, but I believe in the comics was just a human who stole it. A Green Beetle, who is a Martian, and of course the Blue Beetle of Earth. However, that Blue Beetle scarab that was sent to Earth was damaged, likely due to the magical tampering from the ancient Egyptians using it to steal the pharaoh. So instead of having a perfect infiltrator that would bring Earth to the Reach right under the Guardians' noses, it was no longer capable of co-opting Garrett and later Jaime. Instead, it simply formed a symbiotic relationship with them. Due to its damage, it came to refer to itself as Kaji-Da, which is the only part of its serial number that it could remember. So, that was their attempt at explaining why Dan Garrett would go Kaji-Da, because I guess he was yelling out his name. Blue Beetle would therefore have a bit of friction with the Green Lanterns, since their parent factions of the Reach and the Guardians had beef eons ago. Despite that being literally not Jaime's fault in any way, it meant that the Green Lanterns would always be a little bit around him. Despite that wrinkle, Jaime would prove to be an invaluable hero and one of the heavy hitters of the Teen Titans. Jaime is probably the most well-known iteration of the character these days, having appeared in Injustice 2, Batman the Brave and the Bold, and being a central character in Season 2 of Young Justice. Side note, I actually did just get reading Kingdom Come, the 1996 story from DC Comics, something I'd been meaning to get around to for a long time. And I will say, Ted Kord is in that story, but I wouldn't say he plays a prominent role. He's one of the many characters that are just kind of there. Apparently, DC Rebirth recently tried to flip the table, saying that now everybody assumed the Scarab was extraterrestrial when its origin was in fact mystical in nature. Which, I'm sorry, I don't like that. It reeks of writers having no confidence in a character when they continue flip-flopping on the nature of the origin instead of choosing a path and sticking to it. I understand changing it in the first place because, they wanted to bring it more to the cosmic realm that was becoming more popular ever since the Silver Age. But to just reverse that and be like, well, now it's the opposite. It's mystical, and it's not alien at all. Like, you, you've already been both. Why are you trying to flip it? You, like, it's not like it's completely devoid of mystical origin anyway. It was still used as an artifact to seal an ancient mummy. There's some residual magic stuff going on there. You don't need to pull a big haha gotcha and change the entire origin. Like, DC does this a lot with its reboots and its retcons. And they need to learn to pick which parts of former stories worked prior to reboots and stick with them instead of changing unnecessary things for the sake of having them be different. Like, tell me, legitimately, what was the point of making Nightwing's costume red and black instead of blue and black? Like, red and black, everybody does that. Like, it is one of the most common color schemes. Black Widow has it. Red Hood already has it. Like, why? Blue and black is not something you see all that often in comparison. So what was the point? Well, it was just because it was different. Was there a story reason why he was wearing red? Nope, it was just different. They really need to stop doing dumb stuff like that, or just stop rebooting every 5 years. I know, that's a real hot take. Look, Young Justice is the best interpretation of the character in my humble, yet superior opinion. A singular archaeologist named Dan Garrett found a scarab damaged by magic, and he used it to fight crime. His successor, Ted Kord, went, "Whoa, that shit's alien. No thank you, ma'am," and made his own tech to fight as the second Blue Beetle. Then his death led to Jaime discovering the scarab and learning its true alien origin. That works as a story, and it doesn't need to be overcomplicated with reincarnations and, well, actually, retcons about mystical roots. But look, if there's one thing to take away from the legacy of Blue Beetle, something to admire, genuinely, it's the ability to adapt a character to the times. First, a campy superhero, then a gritty noir protagonist, then a gadget-based hero, then an alien superweapon grappling with identity and a family war he never asked to be a part of. The character changed as the viewership changed, and became more complex over time. Sometimes, yes, that was to its detriment. But ultimately, the version of the character we have today works. And given the shaky foundation it's built on, that's so genuinely impressive to me. It proves, in my eyes, anyway, that the medium isn't just evolving, it's improving, which has been arguable, to say the least. In addition to, again, DC's recent reboot madness, the Bronze Age of the late 80s to mid-2000s was extremely divisive, with extreme stories full of all of your 90s radicalness, like gore, incest, and enough pouches to make a pouch-themed superhero parody artwork out of. Side note, Google The Pouch, Rob Liefeld. Trust me, it's hilarious. With an era like that, which started making a lot of casual passers-by think, oh, this is just Stallone action movie drivel that any caveman could beat themselves against a wall with. Like, there's no nuance or greater message to these comic books. First, they were silly camp, and now they're utter trash and rubbish that our hoodlum children are reading. Harumph! It was easy for a lot of people to think that the comic industry was dead, a relic of the past. But much like the Scarab and the character of the Blue Beetle himself, this relic was dusted off, resurrected, given new life with new energy injected into it. The new, younger generation took the responsibility and was able to see through all the grime and the crap. They were able to see the spark of something wonderful and revitalize the industry. I mean, look at the superhero genre now. It is not just living, it's thriving. Thanks to, like, the MCU. If you love the MCU, I'm right there with you. It shows how genre pieces of many different kinds can all coexist, and these characters can be taken seriously without, getting too brooding and edgelordy. They are people, and people react to trauma often by humor. It is a natural response, and like, the stories they tell are fantastic. They can bring tears to your eyes, and then, like, you've also got Zack Snyder's Justice League, which, if you like that, good for you, man. I don't, but you know what? The point I'm making is that there's something for everyone, and that is something that has only happened because of the overall success of the superhero and comic book industry. Thanks to people like you and me, the spirit of these heroes is getting a breath of fresh air. Being a hero is not out of style, and as long as we hold these values close to our hearts, it never will be. And that about wraps up this episode. Feel free to follow my podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, and leave a like if you could, please. Feel free to join my Discord, where I regularly engage with listeners to improve the series. I have a patron system now on Podbean. Please support the show if you can. Any amount of money will do. Even if it's just pocket change, you wouldn't notice if it went missing. And if, for whatever reason, using the Podbean patron system seems whack to you, let me know. I can always make a Patreon. I really want to be able to work on this full time, and it would certainly help a lot. Also, please, if this is something that interests you, tell a friend about Cape Corner. I will not lie to you. I will not beat around the bush. I don't have the funds to advertise this series yet. So word of mouth goes a long way right now. In fact, I would say it's pretty much everything. Next week, I'll probably do a Marvel character, and I'm open to suggestions. With all of that said, thank you for listening. Stay strong, stay true to yourselves, and remember, we can all be heroes.